speaking of dinosaurs, hello and welcome to Cretaceous Park. Oh, sorry, I mean Outlaw Bookseller. That's a good question, isn't it? When Michael Crichton wrote the sequel to Jurassic Park, why didn't he call it Cretaceous Park? And of course, in the Spielberg film of Jurassic Park, I think more or less all the dinosaurs are from the Cretaceous, aren't they? Not the Jurassic. So there we are. We start off with a bit of fine biological pedantry. So today the subject is my favourite science fiction novel. And if you haven't already guessed, my favourite science fiction novel is The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And this is a rather nice A-format pan edition from the late 70s, which I picked up, I think, a few years ago in Hay and Wye. Very nice. A still sealed, out-of-print folio edition of The Lost World, my favourite science fiction novel. I'll tell you why it's my favourite a bit later in the video. Very nice, I have to say. I do have a bit of a folio thing at the moment, and The Lost World I've never had a hardcover, and it's a very important book to me. I'll explain why a bit later. I want to make a distinction here between favourite and best, because there is a difference. I may even turn this into one of those tag things. I've never done one. I don't really sort of follow that sort of booktube sort of stuff, but I want to talk more about language at the end of the video, but just say briefly, it's my favourite in terms of having the warmest feelings towards it, and it is something that is very dear to my heart. So it's quite emotive. So I want to talk about that and why The Lost World is my favourite science fiction novel, and also to do a little review of it as well. As a kid, I was a dinosaur nut. And of course, Ray Bradbury said it best. This is Ray Bradbury's The Machineries of Joy, which contains the wonderful story Tyrannosaurus Rex. And of course, Bradbury wrote some fantastic dinosaur stories. There's a whole book of them, or there used to be, a Bantam trade paperback, which I don't have anymore. So I've got all the stories in other places, like The Foghorn, which was filmed as The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, a really, really wonderful story of a dinosaur which is surviving into the 20th century, and it hears this foghorn on a beach and it thinks that it's a mate calling for it. It's very poignant and quite different to the film, which is your standard sort of stop motion monster movie. And of course he wrote the very wonderful A Sound of Thunder, which is a fantastic time travel story, one of the very best. It's just brilliant stuff. So as Ray Bradbury said, dinosaurs. I'm not so sure about ancient Egypt. I find the ancient Egyptians quite strange, but they are interesting. Planet Mars, well, of course it's interesting. There is at least one dinosaur, maybe two, at the bottom of the earth in Jules Verne's Voyage to the Centre of the Earth, which is a great book. But really, The Lost World is the one. It's the one which started the whole sort of dinosaur craze in popular culture, that is. If you look at The Lost World, interestingly, it was published in 1912, initially serialized in a magazine, and then as the serial came to its last chapter, the book was issued by Hodder and Stoughton. So, of course, it was only 13 years later that Willis O'Brien wrote, Willis O'Brien, he didn't write, he did the stop frame animation for the film version. And this is a Penguin Classics edition. I think this one's out of print now. And as you can see there's a brontosaurus running bonkers in central London. And that is a still from O'Brien's film of The Lost World from 1925. The film was pretty much a dry run for King Kong, which came 8 years later in 1933. And of course, O'Brien stop frame animated that as well. And it's basically the same story. Expedition to an unknown place, discover antediluvian animals, they run rampant in a modern city. So it's the sort of basis of all those sort of giant sort of monster things. We had lots and lots from the 50s onwards, of course. But on The Lost World particularly, the reason why it's so important to me, and I have mentioned this before on the channel, was that The Lost World was the very first adult book I bought in paperback. It was the first work of adult fiction I bought in paperback, and it was also the first science fiction novel I bought in paperback. Not that I was buying them in hardcover before that. And this is my John Murray edition, and this is from, it's got 3 and 6 on there. That's pre-decimal money. Imperial measurement money in the UK faded away in February 1971. I remember it well because I was born in 1963. This copy is from, let's see, this is a 1964 printing. My original one was bought in 1969 and I no longer have it. It just fell apart completely, and I managed to sort of upgrade to this one. So I am sentimental about the original copy. I wish I'd hang on to it, but I got this one. It's in better nick, but it's the same design at the same price on the cover, plus it was slightly higher price. It was in the pre-decimal money. It was in shillings and pence rather than pounds and pence. So it just would have been pence, and it would have been about 20p once the new money came in 1971. So that's it. And as I say, I was a dinosaur nut as a kid, as many children are. And really, that, if anything, was my sort of beginning of my career as a bookish person, because apparently I have no memory of this. When I was in school, my mum taught me to read before I go to school. And when I got to school, I used to take my dinosaur books in and tell all the other children about them. So I was sort of like a autodidact educator from the very beginning. That's where it began. And I was fascinated by the natural world as a child. And that moved over from dinosaurs particularly into films and comics, and then into science fiction novels like this one. So this is why it's my favourite book. So it's got a real sort of big meaning for me. And of course, as I was only 6.5 when I bought this, that was the year of the moon landing as well, 1969, I couldn't read it all, even though I was ahead of my sort of class on reading. We used to have, when I was young, there would be government inspectors would come around the schools and they would test children for literacy and numeracy. And I was never told this at the time. I was told this when I was about 10. I was always 3 years ahead of the rest of the class in terms of reading age. So I was way, way, way ahead. And I put that down to my mother teaching me how to read when I was very small, so I could read fluently before I went to school. And what I used to do with this was I would find the bits with the dinosaurs in and read those. And I gradually, over the few years that followed, got to read the whole book, and there was a lot of words in there, a lot of vocabulary I didn't understand, and it built up and it gave me a really good grounding. It's a fantastic book, and I want to talk about it and do a review about it a little bit later on. But just to sort of speak of dinosaurs generally, of course they've been a science fiction staple since then and then, and there possibly are some before, but I can't think of any. There probably aren't any dinosaur narratives before a certain date, because of course they were only discovered and described scientifically in the 19th century. And there are some great books out there on the rivalries between early dinosaur hunters, particularly in the UK. And they cover people like Mary Anning, who discovered ichthyosaurs, which of course are marine reptiles, and people like, what's the chap's name? Gideon Mantell, very important figure looked down upon at the time by Richard Owen, who was like the sort of big guy in kind of comparative anatomy at that point. And you can read about those days in a great book by Deborah Cadbury called The Dinosaur Hunters. And there are other books out there. There's a lot of great books about dinosaurs. But in science fiction, of course, they became a staple after The Lost World. I'm just going to show you a few other dinosaur-based SF books I've got. I'm sure you'll know some as well. So do mention ones that you know of or you like at the bottom of the screen. And I haven't read, I've only read one of these actually. They're things I've picked up in the last few years while I've been doing the channel. And while I've been doing the channel, my reading has actually slowed down because I spend so much time making videos. So this is Death Beast by David Gerald, which, as you see, this is a UK Science Fiction Book Club edition from the very end of the SF Book Club run. Late 70s, early 80s, they adopted this pictorial livery. And as you can see, it has dinosaurs on the cover, and I believe it's a time travel story. David Gerald is it's a good little writer. His books are great fun. I mean, I wouldn't call him a literary heavyweight, but they are really good fun. And an early book I read in the SF canon as a kid was, I remember reading his tie-in to Battle for the Planet of the Apes, which I read many, many times and I'm very fond of. And his time travel book, The Man Who Folded Himself, is a good one as well. Another one I picked up a few years back, and this is a Robert Hale book by Robert Chilson. And I'm yet to read this, and I absolutely love the title of this book. And it just goes to show an original title really does awaken the mind and get you thinking, because books are about words after all. This is The Shores of Kansas by Robert Chilson, and as you see, there's a chap there being pursued by a large carnosaur. Good for him. Then of course there's Carnosaur by Harry Adam Knight, which I don't have, which is published by Valancourt. I have read it. And Carnosaur is a kind of horror version of Jurassic Park, and we'll come on to Jurassic Park, of course. So that's another one to watch out for. And one I haven't read yet, and again I've picked up in recent years, and I love the title of this book as well. I mean, it's really important to have imaginative titles in SF because, you know, some one-word titles can work because they can be stentorian and dramatic, but to have something with an interesting turn of phrase clicks the synapses and gets you thinking about the novum and the paradigm shift and a wider way of looking at the universe. And that's Speaking of Dinosaurs by Philip E. High. And recently, funnily enough, I see that John at Sci-Fi Scavenger managed to acquire a copy of this, which was certainly in as good nick as mine. And this is about a guy who is an engineer, and he challenges Darwin's theory of evolution, because he looks at dinosaur skeletons and he thinks, well, how can they actually carry all that weight and what have you? So I think the dinosaur thing is tangential, but I'm looking forward to reading that. I've got so much reading going on at the moment because I'm doing a Book of the New Sun project. This may be the first time I've mentioned it on the main body of the channel, but I'm reading the entire solar cycle, so there'll be a series of videos about that, and that's quite a big commitment, and I'm reading other things in between. But anyway, back to Speaking of Dinosaurs. We of course have Jurassic Park, and this is a book club edition. I would really like a really nice edition, and of course the standard edition was, I think it was a royal. This is sort of like an octavo size, and it doesn't have a colophon there, which is a dead giveaway, and underneath it says GP, Guild Publishers of Book Club Associates. And I was actually given an uncorrected proof copy of Jurassic Park by the Random House rep when it was first published, before it was published, about 6 months before it was published, and that would have been early 90s. And I gave it to my friend Simon Beeson, who's a solid SF fan, really good guy. Hi Simon, I hope you're watching, hope you're well. And you know, this is a great little book. And the thing with Jurassic Park that most people don't realise, unless you've read it, is the tone of it is very different to the Spielberg film. It doesn't have that happy-go-lucky, jolly family thing to it. Loads of people die, and yeah, people die in the film, but they die really horribly, and it's quite graphic, and it's very much in Crichton's standard sort of message that he put across, which is very sort of Frankenstein type based, which is don't mess with science because it'll bite you on the ass. And you know, literally that does happen. And the ending of the book is very different to the ending of the film. It's a really good ending. I think the ending's one of the finest endings out there. It's very dark. I absolutely love it. And it says a lot about responsibility and scientific responsibility. And I think it's a good book. It's a classic example of a bestseller that's well worth reading. You know, he was a great craftsman. Was he an artist? I think he came close at times, but he could certainly write a really good narrative, even though his message tended to be the same one. But we can't really sort of diss him for that. And again, he was an early read for me. I read, let me see, I read The Terminal Man in a Reader's Digest condensed book when I was very young as well. I would have been about 10 or 12. And yeah, so he was an early discovery for me. And back in those days, of course, even though we had video recorders and video cameras, there was no DVD or Blu-ray in the early 90s. I had a free ticket to it's a promotional showing of Jurassic Park with two people who worked with me in the office, and I was running a mail order book company at that point. And we had 3 tickets to go and see Jurassic Park. And all the people in this cinema in Bristol, where it was shown, were people who were involved somehow in selling the merchandise, and because we were involved selling the books. And this was shown 6 weeks before the premiere, so it was great to see it. And of course there was a big leap forward in CGI then as well. It was really amazing to see. So still a great book, very, very much so. But on to The Lost World. If you're not familiar with the story, really the beauty of The Lost World, he said, dropping a copy down there, is the fact that it's such a fantastic book in terms of the quality of the writing. Now, Arthur Conan Doyle, of course, was no slouch. He was a best-selling author already, the Sherlock Holmes stories, the Brigadier Gerard stories, and there were a number of Professor Challenger stories. They were mostly shorts. I think there's only 3 altogether. They're in the Penguin Classic, Poison Belt. Let's have a look. We should be able to if I just leaf through this, and you can feast your eyes on that. The Lost World full-length novel, The Poison Belt, The Terror of Blue John Gap, and Horror of the Heights. And is Horror of the Heights a Professor Challenger story? I don't think it is. Yeah. No, it's only The Poison Belt, and this one of The Poison Belt, and the other 2 are SF novels, so SF stories. So there's actually 2, a novel and a short story. So The idea of this is Professor Challenger is the titular character, but this is really an ensemble cast book. That's the great joy of it. And Doyle had a really good way with words, and what he wanted to do with this book was to write a kind of boys' adventure story, which would also be suitable for men as well. The narrator of our story is a young man called Edward Malone, who is a strapping Irish chap of about 21. He plays rugby at the weekend for London Irish, and he is a newspaper reporter, and he wants to achieve greatness. And the book opens with him spending some time with a young woman called Gladys, who he's enamored of and he's in love with. And she bemoans the fact that there's a lack of heroism in the world, that, you know, a lot of the world now has been explored. There's not many white spaces left on the map, and that she will only commit to a man who has performed some heroic acts. And he's thinking, what can I do that would be heroic? And he stumbles across a controversy about Professor Challenger. Now, Professor Challenger is big, hirsute, middle-aged, bellicose, opinionated, but he's usually right. And he's typical of the kind of characters who flourished in sort of popular writing in the late Victorian and early Edwardian period. I mean, I find Sherlock Holmes incredibly irritating character, and also in Verne's Around the World in 80 Days, Phineas Fogg. He's really irritating as well. These kind of know everything guys, and they just get on your nerves. And but they're actually very entertaining as well. And Challenger's like that. And he actually has a heart of gold, but he can be quite violent. He's got a very short temper. And he's rather anthropoid as well, which is quite funny because, of course, this is kind of a satire of Darwinism as well, in a way as well. And Challenger has returned from an expedition to South America in which he claims to have discovered evidence that antediluvian animals, that animals from prehistory, are still alive somewhere in that continent. Through a series of minor escapades, Malone gets to talk to Challenger, is discovered to be a journalist because Challenger hates journalists, and then some fisticuffs occur. But eventually, Challenger turns up at a biological society meeting where he keeps asking questions of a speaker, and he booms the word question over and over again until he gets a chance to say his piece. And he claims then again that there are antediluvian animals living in South America. And a challenge is raised, then there must be proof. And Ed Malone seizes his chance and thinks, this is how I get to impress Gladys, my wannabe girlfriend. And he leaps up and he says, I'll come on the expedition. And also does Lord John Roxton. Now, Lord John Roxton is a classic sort of British hero. He's a lord. He is a big game hunter, explorer, sportsman, and he's a very fine, upstanding chap. And of course, he belongs to a gentleman's club, as they do all. And also, the fourth member of the party is Professor Summerlee, who is a 66-year-old, crusty old academic who is quite fit and sprightly, and he is opposed to Challenger's view. But this is really a thing about science, where you've got the two scientists who don't agree with each other, and they go off to South America in search of the truth. And the thing about The Lost World is that it does have some wonderful stuff in it. It doesn't just dive in straight away. You're introduced to the characters. The prose is very fruity and flavoursome, and this edition has pictures from other editions in it. And there's a wonderful part early on which really grabbed my imagination as a kid, where Challenger shows Malone a notebook which he has found in South America on the body of a dead man, an explorer called Maple White, an American, in which there are sketches of stegosauri and things like that. And it's got all sorts of wonderful incident in it. And eventually we follow the expedition, and that is, at that photograph there, that is actually Conan Doyle pretending to be Challenger. That tells you everything about Conan Doyle and how he liked to lark. And very, very much you're taken along. It's very much a book of his time. It's the end of the Edwardian period, and it's very entertaining and warm-hearted and funny. And the writing is just fantastic. It's so full of great vocabulary and incident. And it has these wonderful chapter headings where a piece of dialogue from the text is used as a chapter heading. So it's just the very biggest thing in the world. Try your luck with Professor Challenger. For once I was the hero Who could have foreseen it? They all sound like Anthony Trollope tiles. You know, they're very flavoursome, as I say, and it's great stuff. So our intrepid quartet, which contains at least 2 skeptics. Malone is fairly open-minded about it. They go along, and Lord John Roxton's very happy because there are large animals to shoot, and they discover the plateau, which the location of which Challenger was kept secret, and then they return to London with proof. And they don't bring a Brontosaurus back like in the film. It's something subtler than that, but absolutely marvelous. So I got this folio edition the other day, and I got this on eBay because it's out of print. There has been a previous folio edition. This is from about 2013, and it's absolutely brilliant. And I read about the first 50 pages, and I'm transported back to when I was learning to read adult fiction for the first time, and my admiration for this book just grows and grows, and it's so funny, and it's a cracking tale, it has to be said. So that's my favourite science fiction novel, and that's why it's my favourite science fiction novel. Just to talk a bit more about dinosaurs, I mean, I think it's a common thing. I think a lot of people who are interested in SF are interested in the prehistoric world because it's so fascinating. And I do have a small collection of books about dinosaurs, and that's something I really love is adult books about dinosaurs, and they're quite hard to come by. You don't get many published. A lot of the really nice hardcover ones are expensive. They're aimed at experts who have an understanding of paleontology far deeper than mine. So I could go mad with them. If I had the money and the space, I would go mad with them, believe you me. But I'm just going to show you a few things from my archive. And this is Dinosaurs, A Journey to the Lost Kingdom by Christine Argo and Luc Vives. And this is from a French museum. This is published by Flammarion, who are a really fantastic French publisher. Their books are beautiful. They tend to be art and fashion books, and this comes in a slipcase. I'm showing you the slipcase. Great, and it's got one of those very old pictures of the dinosaurs attacking each other. I love the sort of early dinosaur art. It's really evocative. It's often completely inaccurate in terms of the science, of course, but we're still discovering a lot, but it is beautiful. So yeah, lovely. I'm not sure if this is still in print. I bought this probably 7-8 years ago. And there's the book itself, laminated boards, no dust jacket, and it's absolutely illustrated absolutely throughout with all sorts of lovely black and white and colour illustrations. So do watch out for that. Absolutely marvelous, and it's about dinosaurs and science and popular culture, so it's really, really nice and lovely book, sort of thing that you just need to have on your shelves because it's so beautiful. Of course, these days we are getting used to the idea, however reluctantly, and I know I'm reluctant to agree with it, even though the evidence is all there, of course, and it's been there for a while now, that of course feathered dinosaurs are the origin of birds, that birds evolved from dinosaurs and other reptiles. And there's a lot of fossils now, but they've actually found the imprint of feathers and fossilized feathers. So this is a book which shows you all sorts of artistic renderings of dinosaurs and early birds, looking at that sort of end of the spectrum, and great stuff. So that's a very interesting one. As I was saying, I do like sort of archaic art about, I say archaic, it's not archaic, it's probably late 19th, early 20th century art about prehistoric life. And if you're interested in that, this is a fantastic monograph of Charles R. Knight, the artist who saw through time, and he did absolutely loads of wonderful paintings of prehistoric life. And this is an absolutely beautiful book from Abrams, American art publisher, whose books are such good quality, and the prices are usually relatively low compared to British books of the same kind. Not sure if that's still in print, but that's an absolute cracker. And there's a Smilodon there, saber-toothed tiger on the cover, and we've got a couple of ceratopsians and a carnosaur stalking them on the back there. And it's also a full-blown biography of Charles L. Knight. It's really, really nice. Just to finish off, this is a book I stock at work, especially at Christmas time, and there is a sequel to it which I don't have, and this is Dinosaur Art, edited by Steve White, the world's greatest paleoart. And paleoart is the term for the depiction of prehistoric life, and this focuses on 6 or 7 of the best dinosaur artists. It's published by Titan Books. We do lots of SF, of course. It's only 25 quid, and it's full colour throughout, and it's absolutely fantastic. It really is beautiful, and all sorts of depictions in here. This is a particularly poignant one, and this shows an ichthyosaur leaping just as the meteor comes down and it's about to strike at the end of the Cretaceous and wipe out, you know, a huge percentage. It's something like 90% of the animals on Earth were wiped out, weren't they? And what you find in this book is it also has some, it's not just Mesozoic, it also has some Cenozoic art of the age of mammals as well. And it's absolutely fantastic. And there's lots of different means. Each artist uses a different means. One of them uses the incorporation of photography, really, really clever. So if you're a dinosaur nut, or even if you have an older child to us, this is a great present for them. Absolutely fantastic. So there you go. So there's a little bit more on dinosaurs. And that's why The Lost World is my favourite science fiction novel. It just has such meaning to me. And it is a great book. And it comes, of course, round about the same time as Edgar Rice Burroughs had his, not his Renaissance, but his golden period, where he was producing The Land That Time Forgot, The People That Time Forgot, and Out of Time's Abyss, and also at the same time he was doing things like Princess of Mars and Tarzan of the Apes. So it all sort of ties together. So it does come from that wonderful age between the birth of the scientific romance in 1818 with Shelley. Then Wells comes along in 1895, hot on Verne's heels, and he really, really does bring SF together. And then there's that interesting period, which some people are trying to call the Radium Age. There's a lot of very minor stuff from that period. There's some interesting stuff. Between 1895 and 1925 when Hugo Gernsback gets along. So Lost World is a key text from that era. And I do urge you to read it if you haven't read it, because it's very, very good. It's very entertaining. It's very funny. And it also has all the literary virtues. It's a great, great book. Language. I wanted to talk about language briefly because, of course, I think something that gets lost, and I know I've mentioned this before, is that people confuse the usage of words with the meaning of them. And it is that whole thing, like the favourite and best thing. So a lot of people watching this video who will have tuned out by now will automatically assume that by favourite I mean best. Well, it's not. It's a different thing. Your favourite might be the best science fiction novel you've read, and there may be a good reason for that, or there may be a different, more emotive reason for that. So a favourite and the best can be two different things. So you can listen, say, to a record and think this is my favourite record, but more objectively realise that there are probably better records in your collection. So that's very, very much the way it goes. And I mean, a word which is much misused because of its usage, and has a deeper meaning than the usage of moss on the surface, is pretentious, for example. Now, the root word of the word pretentious, and of course it means highfalutin, above one's station, trying to project something which one isn't actually capable of, what and doesn't fully understand. And I think we all do that. You know, I think when Brian Eno and David Bowie were accused of being pretentious by the music press, they said, oh, we're delighted to have created a whole new school of pretension because we're artists who are exploring things and we're willing to fail and to go out on a limb rather than just stay safe. And I think that's an important thing. Now, of course, the word pretentious includes the word pretense. To pretend is from the word pretend. So, you know, the question is, when somebody or something is deemed to be pretentious, the question is, how are they pretending, or to what degree are they pretending? Do they have something to back them up? Is there something which validates them? And, you know, that's something for you to ponder. I think, am I pretentious? Yeah, occasionally. I think, you know, you've got to try and push the boundaries. But I do hope I've got something to validate me, which is my sort of books and what have you, which I published and which I didn't publish, Bloomsbury published, and have done reasonably well, you know, which they come back into print because the print on demand option seems to have finished now. But it is what it is. So, you know, the meaning of words is important when you're reading. And it's not just the usage, and the usages are often incorrect. I mean, if you take something like, people say disorientated, that's not a word. That's a usage which has come about. The word is disoriented. Now, disorientated has got into dictionaries because people are using it, and that's how language evolves. But it's more a question of, is the language devolving or is it evolving? And recently I've been watching Married at First Sight Australia with the video widow. And a couple of times people on there have said conversating when they mean conversing, because they use the word conversation. They seem to think that conversate is a word. It's not, it's converse. So there you go. Anyway, enough of this sort of banter about language. This isn't a lexicographical channel, though maybe it will become it in the future. Hope you enjoyed that. What are your favourite science fiction novel? I would really, really love to know. Stick your answers underneath, and maybe we'll do a video about that. That would be good. Your favourite science fiction novel. And I'd also like to know about your favourite dinosaur stories and novels in SF, because there must be loads I haven't mentioned. Anyway, nice to see you all. See you again soon. This is Outlaw Bookseller, signing out for now. Bye.